everyone, RogueGold here. Welcome back to the Division 2. And today, I'm coming at you with a full breakdown of the new Year 8 Season 1 seasonal modifiers called Recombinant. This is probably the most requested video that I've gotten so far for this new season, because yes, these modifiers do have a lot of complexity to them, and that seems to have tripped up a lot of people. Do not fear, I don't think they need to be as daunting as some people are making them out to be, but by the end of this video, you should have a full understanding of the system and at least know how you want to engage with these modifiers, as we are going to go over the rules surrounding them, some of the changes made to the system this season, and cap things off with a little recommendation and build guide should you need that. So we'll dive right in. If you end up enjoying this and you want to see more coverage on the new season from me, then be sure to subscribe. As always, have to give a big shout out and thank you to our channel members. Thank you so much for going out of your way each and every month to support what I do. But without further ado, let's dive into this. So to begin, let's just cover the basics, which I always like to do in case anybody watching has not interacted with the modifier system before. You access your seasonal modifiers right here within your menu between your specialization and shade watch. Clicking on this will reveal the menu from which you can freely activate or deactivate these at any time. Modifiers are not a required system that you are forced to interact with, but do note that by having them enabled, you do gain a 10% bonus to your season pass XP gain. You'll start the season looking like this with none of the actives or passives unlocked, but let's quickly talk about how you do gain access to those. The first source is right here within your seasonal journey. This is how you unlock both the active modifiers as well as a small selection of the passive ones. So if you look on the right side, you will see that different objectives within Journey Chapter 3 specifically award you with different passive modifiers, whereas completing at least 6 objectives here and completing the overall journey chapter or mission as they call it on the left side there, that awards you with all 3 of the active modifiers and 3 additional passives. As far as collecting the remainder of the modifiers, because this season we have 34 total passives, that is a lot. These can actually be purchased in any order you wish from a new vendor that is within the base here. So right next to the specialization coordinator is the recombinant vendor and station. And as you can see, using a new season exclusive currency, you can buy these in any order you wish. Now, as far as obtaining that currency to buy the passive modifiers, you have 2 different sources of it. One is, once again, the seasonal journey. You will see starting at mission 3, different of these objectives will reward you with BTSU firmware. As you can see on the right side, I believe 3 just has maybe 2 of these that offer them, but then from 4 onward, every single minor objective will award you with 150 BTSU firmware. The other source is then completing Manhunt Scouts. As you can see, for completing Scout 1 in its entirety, I earned 350 BTSU firmware, and so presumably that trend will continue as we progress through the scouts. Once you've got all that sorted, we can then move on to talking about the global modifier, which is the fundamental rule set and set of mechanics that the entire seasonal modifier system revolves around. So this season it is called Recombinant, and it reads: gain 3 modules that provide different bonuses depending on their stack values. The offense module improves combat efficiency, the defense module increases survivability, and the utility module boosts shade skills. Each module starts with 10 stacks, which can be permanently increased by leveling up active modifiers. Equip passive modifiers to further manipulate these values, with the order of passives determining the final result. So that's of course just scratching the surface, but a lot of people that I've seen so far have ran into a lot of confusion with this system and these modifiers, mostly because there is so much that you can do with this, so much customization to be had. But what I want to stress, and we're going to cover this, is that you will get out of this system exactly as much as you put in. If you want to keep things simple and you just want to add in passives that say boost this, boost this, boost this, you'll get some free stats and you can move on and not have to think about it. Or if you do want to dive a bit deeper and really get into the math of how to best utilize these numbers, then yes, you will go even further with your total power. But I just want to make it clear that you do not need to have a PhD nor get one this season to really understand and utilize these things. If you want to keep it simple, we can do just that. So my first tip, if you're going to be using the modifier system, is to have these enabled. Slot in a active modifier as soon as you unlock these from Journey Tier 3, because as the global description notes, and as you can see down below the description of each one of these actives, these can be leveled up. And not only does that increase the efficiency and power of these individual abilities, but as you'll see at levels 2 and 4 for each of these, it increases your base module stacks for all 3 of the main categories. Meaning, again, if you just want more free stats and you want to get the most out of the system, you want to use and level up all 3 actives, and that will increase the numbers on the module stacks. From there, to be clear, it does not really matter which active you want to run. There is one that is based more around offense, one around defense, and one utility. All that you really need to keep in mind is that these do synergize with what your module stack values are at. So, for example, right here, it says that for Optimize and Overload, you activate it to reduce your active skill cooldowns by 46%, but then it says that that is a 30% value by base, but that gets enhanced by 0.8% per utility stack. And if we go back to the global, you will see that we have 20 utility stacks. If I were, however, to then go into our passive modifiers, go down to utility and slot in one that increases those stacks, we then go right back to the active, and if we look at the description for Optimize Overload, it is now at a 54% rate because, again, we're running higher utility stack values. So, once again, to clarify, you can use whichever ability here you find most enticing and most appealing, but you will get more benefit out of it if you do align it with whatever category of module stacks you're going for. We're going to dive into the passive modifiers in their own dedicated section next because they are really the cornerstone of this entire system, and we need to go way more in depth than we're going to with the rest of this stuff. But quickly, I just did want to address that from this menu, as always, you can click the button to see the hostile modifiers for this season. We have Inversion Field, System Drain, and Obstructor Virus. And let's jump over to do a super quick demonstration of what you should watch out for with these. Alright, so as per usual, it can be a little bit tough to fully track these in combat given how quickly we churn through enemies and how much you have to really identify these different symbols while you're fighting. But I want to quickly point out one that you can at least pretty easily identify. So you see on this gold ad, he has a red circle all around him along with that symbol. Also note that the guy next to him has a different red symbol with knives. These red icons are the hostile modifiers for the season. And if we go back into the menu, we will be able to find those exact icons when in this description menu. So that elite had inversion field on him, and that is the red radius that you saw. It says generates a 7.5 meter radius, and if you are standing within that field, the bonuses granted by your highest module will be reversed. In other words, if you're keeping it simple, do not go within the red ring while you have modifiers enabled. But then it does say that if you kill that enemy that has it, you will be immune from that debuff for a certain period of time. So once again, that is the pretty easy one to navigate and look out for. But once again, if you see a red icon above an enemy's head, that is a hostile modifier, and you can refer back to their descriptions in that menu at any time if you want to know what they fully do. Alright, but now let's get into the real meat of things with your passive modifiers. One thing I want to say right off the bat is, to a degree, I do think people are overcomplicating these just a little bit, because all they are is they tie into the module stacks that you can see under the global description, and all it is free extra stats. You can see that by running nothing right now on this loadout, I'm getting 20% weapon handling, 10% maximum armor, and 20% skill damage. But unlike past seasons where you had to go in and track different things on your UI and during gameplay, there's none of that here. You don't have any UI. All it is giving you is free bonus stats. So that is why I said in the intro, if you want to just go ahead and make this pretty simple, slot in a few upgrades and leave it there, you will get your free stats, and you can then completely forget about them and move on with your day. But that said, of course, it is still important to go over how we can best manipulate these and get the most amount of stats out of this system. Well, before taking a look at them, the one very important thing to note, as stated at the end of the global modifier description, is that the order in which you slot in your passive modifiers matters this season. I've said it in a few past videos, but this is very much a Balatro style system if you've played that game with their jokers. At the bottom of the global modifier, you can specifically see 1, 2, 3, the slots in which you have your passives inserted, and the order of that will determine the final outcome of the stats that you're receiving. But once again, let's keep it simple. Let's say you look at utility and you say, I want more skill damage. I'm going to run a skill build. How can I just buff that up and move on? Well, we want to go to our first passive slot, which is here on the right side. That was definitely the left side. I promise I know my directions. But you want to navigate down to utility because those are the ones that influence your skill stats and your utility stats. And once again, it can be pretty straightforward. This one right here, consumes, says that it increases your utility stacks by 10, but then decreases your offensive and defensive by 5 each. Let's insert that into slot 1 right here, and what you will see is that the UI automatically updates, and it now shows that we have 30 utility stacks, granting us 30% skill damage. Alright, great, but let's say we want to go even further. We back out, we move on to slot 2, And then we can also look at a different category, for example, defense. Maybe you're going full glass cannon on a skill build and you don't need this max armor that defense is granting you. Split here says it will decrease your defensive stacks by 15, but it will increase offense and utility by 10 each. So we put that in, defense goes to 0, but now our utility has gone up to 40 and we're getting 40% skill damage. But then we still have another slot to go. Let's go over to number 3. If we want, we could do the exact same thing for offense. Let's say we really just don't need those offensive stacks. Slot this in, our offense goes down to 10. We regain 10 defensive stacks, but now our utility has gone up to 50 in total, granting 50% skill damage. Like I said, if you want to keep it simple, you want to raise up whatever stat you need and leave it there, forget about it, you could do just that. But obviously that is one of just many combinations that you could potentially make with this system. A pretty important concept to cover here is the convert passives, because let's say you're going for a damage related setup here, but you're like, I don't really want weapon handling, that doesn't boost my DPS. Well, each category, offense, defense, and utility, does offer these convert modifiers, which will change what stat you are being provided. So, for example, in slot 1, I could put in convert, which switches it to headshot damage, and all of a sudden, because it's 3% per stack, I'm now getting 60% headshot damage. Or, same thing down for defensive. If we look at those, they have one that converts it to protection from elites, they have one that converts it to hazard protection. So once again, it is worth identifying which stat you would actually like to extract from this system. Be sure to buy that passive from the station, and then you can slot those in and target that. So once again, that is the simple stuff. If you just want to switch to the stat you want, put a few increases on, leave it at that, you can absolutely do just that. But let's say you do want to dive a little bit deeper, get into the math of things. Well, the heights of the system and the module stack mechanic can be pushed pretty far. For example, I'm going to take that one out. Let's say I really want a lot of headshot damage, but maybe I don't care too much about the other ones. Well, I could put convert in here in slot 1 to switch us to headshot damage. In slot 2 then, I'm going to say I don't really need any utility stacks. My build is not going around skill damage or skills at all. I could slot in saturate, which says that it increases our utility stacks by 25, but those stacks no longer receive stat benefits. So I put that in. Suddenly utility is at 45, but it's giving me no actual benefit. But then finally for slot 3, I can go all the way down to what they called wild cards. These are the pretty crazy ones. And I could put in cascade. This says that stats and active modifiers are no longer affected by the highest module stacks, but half of its value is going to be added to the 2 other stacks. Meaning, because I've buffed utility up so much, that one is no longer going to count, which it already doesn't, but then it shares and benefits the other 2. So I slot that in, suddenly I've got 129% headshot damage. And even though I'm not focusing around it, still a 21.5% armor bump, which is solid. So that is just one example of how, yes, if you want to really dive into this and do the math, you can achieve some pretty crazy combinations and numbers. It all comes down to the order in which you slot these things in and what stats you ultimately want to chase. To close out, I wanted to offer you a very quick shopping guide, if you will, for the passive modifiers here. I anticipate there are going to be questions of people asking, well, which ones should I prioritize? Which ones do I want to get first? A disclaimer before we get into it that I am recording this video on day 2 of the update. There is still a lot of experimentation and research to be done on what some of the very best combinations could be. So do not take this as me saying this is the absolute best way to go. These are just some of the early picks and builds that I think are pretty strong and fun personally. So of course it will depend on what you're going for, right? If you have a particular build in mind that you may want to buy the modifiers here that best align with that. But for me, I bought the convert ones in both offense and defense for hazard protection and headshot damage. Those are 2 specific builds that I wanted to go for. I tend to not run a lot of skill builds, so I bought the saturate one in utility, which again increases those stacks but makes it so that they are no longer affected by the stats. That said, if you're the opposite of me and you run skills but maybe you don't want any damage, you could do the exact same thing. You could buy the saturate offense one to increase those but remove the stat values, and those ones specifically come in handy down for the wild cards where things really get crazy. Cascade I think is the easier one to understand and utilize. I know some people have been going crazy with nullify so far, but that is probably one of the most complex modifiers in the system, so maybe I'll get to that later on. But currently I'm going with Cascade. And so for me, there's kind of two early builds that have emerged that I think are going to be quite fun with this. This first one is your pretty standard Striker DPS build, but as you can get a preview of on the right side, I'm converting my offensive stacks to headshot damage instead of weapon handling. I'm then using that aforementioned Saturate, one to increase utility but remove the values, and then finally Cascade splits that between the other two, raising my headshot damage by a lot and giving me a little bit of bonus max armor. All of that is then contributing into this build, which you all have seen a variation of on this channel before, but the Eagle Bear deals a lot with headshot damage. Of course, Striker is just a lot of damage overall. And so with the modifiers in mind, if we jump over here, I have 200% headshot damage on a build that still has 55 crit chance, 143 crit damage. And so far I've had a lot of success running this in like escalation tier 3, 4, completely solo. It's great with, I don't think I had it slotted in, but using the Blackout Pulse active mod. That one's really fun. One potential other option though, welcome back, Backfire Striker build. This is a type of build that has been very popular in past seasons with past sets of modifiers. And so if you really enjoy this build in this playstyle, you can achieve a very similar thing with this new set of mods. The only thing we've swapped out in our modifiers here is the very first one. We switched it to convert defense so that we're now getting hazard protection instead of max armor, then saturate for the utility, cascade those, and we are getting 43% hazard protection and weapon handling. In total, then I do have hazard rolled on a few of my Striker pieces here, and if we go over to the stats and scroll all the way down, you will see that I have a nice 93% hazard protection. One bleed mod takes that to 100 for the backfire. And so yeah, again, on the theme of keeping it simple, if you just want to set it up this way, get that hazard, and then forget about the modifiers altogether, you can do just that, but the combinations and the total ways in which you can use this system are truly endless. All right, everybody, well there you have it. That is my breakdown and guide of the new recombinant seasonal modifiers. Hopefully that helped clear things up a bit. I would be very curious to know from those of you who were completely mystified by this heading in if this did help explain things. I know at first glance a lot of these systems can seem pretty impenetrable if you are not accustomed to this kind of stuff. But again, I think there truly is a middle ground to be found here and a level of simplicity that you can stay at should you choose to. So anyway, let me know your thoughts on the system. Let me know if this helped out. And most importantly, if you have any remaining questions about the entire modifier setup this season, leave those down below too. That's all I've got for this one though. Thank you so much for coming by and watching. I'll catch you back soon. But until then, RogueGold. Ow. Oh! We just got a Ravenous! Haha! I might not be friendly. Let's go.
Coming to the Division 2.
Let's go.